Welcome to Custom Homebuilders Solutions, a web-based software, also known as CHS, a standalone accounting suite focused on job costing and profit management for professional home builders.
Hello, this is Carol King, the developer of Custom Homebuilders Solutions, also known as CHS software. In this video, we will begin talking about setting up what we call vendors in CHS. And what are vendors, you say? Well, first of all, let's go over here to where it says Vendors Setup and Info on the main menu and click the button, What are vendors? In CHS, all outside entities that you pay, like trade contractors, suppliers, overhead suppliers, etc., that provide goods and services, are referred to as vendors. They are entities that you will be paying either by check, credit card, or even bank debits. So you'll even set up, probably if you have a bank, maybe you bank with Bank of America. You'll set up Bank of America as a vendor because you might be paying them service charges, etc. They might be doing a debit. And you'll post anything that you've paid out of your checking account to a vendor on the window to post things that you're paying vendors. It's the payables bills window, actually, which we'll get to much later. Vendors will be used when you enter bills to pay, just like I was mentioning, or paid bills or checks that you've already written. They'll be used when you're requesting bids from vendors for a job, preparing purchase orders for a job. You'll select the vendor, or you'll select a vendor as an assignee for schedules and tasks, etc. But there is one main place that you keep all of these vendors and set them up, and that is on the vendors list and setup. When you open this, you'll see a list of all of your vendors, and you'll notice that as I click on ones, you'll get some information about address. You can do a Google map, get phone numbers right away to call them, etc. after you've set them up, which is what we're going to do. Before we set up, I'd like to show you that CHS has something called a vendor info form that you can click on that's blank. So maybe you know somebody you're going to set up but you don't have their information. You can open this, which will first open as a web thing, and it is better to get it downloaded to your own computer and tell it to open with your own PDF reader. That way you get tools like right here. I have a tool for emailing this, so I could click this email. It should go find my default email if I've set it up of some kind, and then you could email this to your new vendor, or you could of course just print it out and hand it to them. If you're talking to them, say please fill this out, and they'll give you basic address, phone number, contact information, payment terms, and hopefully attach, if they're supposed to give you a general liability insurance certificate, attach that, attach a W-9, that kind of thing. And then hopefully they'll email all of that back to you after they've filled it out. So in my case, I have a new vendor that has emailed me back their info form, and I'm going to set up that new vendor right now. Before we go to adding a new vendor, I would like to point out, if you notice all of these things, they're called vendor codes. That really uniquely identify the vendor by their code. So you should do that smartly, like if it's big buck construction, do it big buck. Don't make your codes be a bunch of numbers like that in the olden days of computers. And if you're coming forward from some olden one, you might say, well, we have numbers for all of these. Well, numbers really are not a good idea, because as you're entering bills to pay or creating a new purchase order and it's asking for the vendor, you can just start typing the first few letters and it'll move in the drop-down list that you're using to that code. And you don't want to have to suddenly remember what number it is in your brain. This makes it easy to remember. And if you have something like Maria Diaz Cleaning Services, you want to do it so that they'll sort alphabetically like you'd expect, because a lot of times reports will be sorted alphabetically by the code, and in normal filing, etc., you use the last name. So for Maria Diaz, you might set it up as Diaz Cleaning so that it's easy. But it's up to you. Whatever's easiest and whatever order you want reports to sort in is how you should do that code. So let's go ahead and add a new vendor. I'm just going to use Austin Air. You can use up to 10 digits for the code, alphanumeric digits, and this is basically going over what I've already told you about and how you can change the vendor code if you need to later, which we'll get into when we get into some of the utilities about vendors. So I put in Austin Air, and I'm using all caps because that's nicer when you're printing reports and they're sorted by the vendor name or vendor code to have them be in all caps, but you don't have to. This vendor name right here will be what is used when you print checks, and that's what will be printed on the checks, so you should make it as needed. If there needs to be a different name for a 1099, you'll see us doing that. There's another place where you put the 1099 name when you set up the vendor. I'm going to wipe this out for a second just to demonstrate that if I submit this right now, it's going to tell me I have an error. It's going to make it pink, and if you hover over, it's going to tell you why, and it's saying it cannot be empty. So that's just an example. Until you click submit again, it'll stay pink. So we're submitting, it goes away, and it opens a big screen here to enter all of the basics of this vendor. I'm actually going to pause for just a second and type this basic stuff in and then come back to the top. So I'm back, and I have filled in the street address, the city, state, and zip, a contact name that I like to have there for who I should contact for Austin Air Conditioning, an email address for that contact, and I haven't done anything else. We're going to go back to these fields. We will just be talking about this basic vendor info in this video, but you absolutely must not miss the rest of the videos about 1099 information, general liability insurance, defaults to drop in when you're entering bills. But let's just go back and focus on the ones in this block. Before I start, though, I'd like to point out that they sent back their vendor info form to me after I asked for it that I mentioned earlier. And once they have, I could upload that and get it attached to this vendor so that I could always look at it easily in CHS. We have a place to upload a vendor contract, the W-9 form, etc. We'll be coming back to some of that and things that are licensed, like city licenses, etc., for miscellaneous expirations. But I'm going to use the other field to upload that vendor info form. And the first thing I'll do is click a button for upload photo or video. And I'm going to navigate to my C drive in my browse window. And even though that's called Robert's Custom Homes, I actually have some stuff stored under Randall Builders just because I'm a demo person. And I made a folder under Randall Builders for my own company called Vendor Control Docs. And in there I have the form that they sent me, which I renamed Austin Air Info Form after they sent me the PDF. And I put a date on it, which is today, and I usually start with a year and then the date. So I'm going to double click that so that it will upload. There's other videos about uploading things and how you use small URLs to send information to somebody else, but the main thing you should do is give it a meaningful title. So you might put Austin Air Info Form right over here and then save it. And if I close it, you'll see that all of a sudden I could open this. If this was closed and I reopen this wanting to look at their documents, I can open the document, click it to open, and have it in another tab that I could be referring to it. So I left it there and left it open, close all of this stuff, and I left it open up here in another tab in my browser to jump to it and look at it to see what information I needed. Also, by the way, if you noticed when I was typing a minute ago the name, I misspelled conditioning, and I have fixed that. I just typed over this in the vendor name. The code you won't be able to type into here, but if you click the vendor code ? Button up here, it's going to tell you that those are changed by clicking the code hyperlink for the vendor on the vendors list, and we will talk about that in a later video, changing the code. We'll also talk about how to delete the vendor. So the next field that you find here is something called status, and you can select active or inactive. The default status is active when you set up a new one, but later, if you will no longer be using the vendor, you can change the status to inactive. If the vendor status is inactive, checks will not be printed for the vendor, even if there are bills to pay. This is a handy way to put a vendor, quote, on hold that should not be paid. So the next field is something called vendor type. You will select a vendor type from the drop-down list, but to add or a new vendor type that you'd like to have, you can click the plus button here, and then you can click Add New Vendor Type, and you can type in a new vendor type and submit it. There will be some supplied for you like subcontractor, etc. when you first get CHS. Probably some defaults will be here already, but you could add a new type. The most commonly used vendor types are subcontractor, supplier, and overhead. Overhead is generally used for vendors that provide overhead products or services such as office supplies, telephone, utilities, etc. But we are going to select subcontractor because that's what this vendor is here. The list of vendors can be searched for one or more vendor types to print on vendor info reports. And the vendor type is especially useful when selecting vendors for producing waivers of lien, because quite often you only want to do waivers of lien for checks you've printed. You can produce waivers of lien for checks you've printed and paid to hand to them, and you might just want to search for the checks to subcontractors. And there's other reports and ways to search for various types of vendors if you need to. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of what that one is for. Down here, where we have the contact name, let me go ahead and save this. Once you've saved it, some buttons will go dim until you've saved it so that you don't jump off to somewhere else before you save this information. But notice that there's a More button here by the contact name. So maybe you have Bob Jones, who you usually deal with at Austin Air, to order products or etc. But maybe you also have, you want to know who the bookkeeper is at Austin Air, and maybe it's Mary Smith or something, and their phone number is something. Her phone number is maybe a little different for whatever reason, and she has some different email address, which I always just put somewhere.com because I'm making them up. But you might put bookkeeper, maybe you put extension 4, and maybe it's the same phone number as the office one that I actually put over here. You can add a couple of other contacts, so that if you save that and close that, let's close this whole window for just a minute and we'll come back. Notice that Austin Air is now in the list, and pay no attention to that. I also already have one. I'm going to be deleting this one because it's a demo. But Austin Air, when I click on it, I can do it from this list, click on it, and all over the place in CHS you can open the thing that has all the contacts. But notice how I could quickly look for other contacts or look at the contact name here. So that's why I wanted to close this for a second. Now once it's set up, to come back and edit it, you click the pencil edit icon button here, and that's how you edit or do some more work on it to get it to open for edit mode. Before I leave the basics here, I wanted to mention that the city that you set up for your company on your company master will automatically drop in here, but if you need to put in a different city you can do so, and the state will drop in so you don't have to type it again. The customer number here is if they've assigned you a customer number, and if they put it on that info form or whatever it is, you can put that here just for reference. It's really just a reference thing. Now I'd like to quickly go over CB USA vendor because it is in this block. If you click this question mark button, it will explain to you that if you're a member of a Custom Builder USA group and this vendor is participating, select yes in the box. On the window for viewing all payables transactions later, you can actually search for transactions related to a CB USA vendor. Then print any results reports from searching for those bills, and then that's handy for producing the quarterly reports that will show how much has been purchased from or paid to CB USA vendors. And for more information about custom builders, it's so that they can get good prices on ordering a bunch of stuff, etc., from what I understand. you can click this link that we have to go to their website to learn more about that. We'll continue to some next videos to discuss all of the rest of this information over here in these other blocks, which is very important. You shouldn't do two things too quickly. You should pay attention to these because they will make your life, these defaults, etc., much easier when you're entering bills. And you need various things like these to drop in when you're entering bills and to alert you about information about the vendor. So that's it for this video, and we will continue on to the next video about this other information. Thank you for watching.